She was down 5-1 against a defending champion, in a stadium already filling with people quietly heading for the exits. And then a 21-year-old from the Philippines did something that made grown men go silent and strangers grab each other's arms without even realizing they'd done it. If you think you know how this story ends, you don't, because the real turning point wasn't a scream or a fist pump. It was a girl walking slowly to a towel, taking one breath, and turning back around like nothing had happened. Here's what makes this even harder to believe. Just 2 days before this match, she had already survived a brutal 3-set war against an Olympic champion. Her body should have been running on empty. Her opponent knew every one of her patterns. And when the scoreboard flipped against her in the worst possible way, everyone in that arena, including some of the players themselves, quietly started writing the ending in their heads. They were wrong. Stay with me, because what happens in the next 15 minutes of this match will tell you everything about why one of the most respected voices in tennis history just called this a movement. If stories like this are the reason you watch sports, not just for the final score, but for the moment someone refuses to accept what the scoreboard is telling them, then you already know you're in the right place. This channel exists because we were paying attention to this player before most of the tennis world even knew her name. So if you want to keep being early to moments like this instead of finding out about them after everyone else already has, hit subscribe right now, because what's coming next in this story is far from over. Washington, D.C. was buzzing in a way it hadn't in years, and it had nothing to do with politics or celebrity. It was tennis. Specifically, it was a flag. Red, blue, and gold showing up everywhere you looked, in the stands, on t-shirts, on handmade signs held by kids who probably should have been in bed hours earlier. Filipino families across the East Coast had rearranged entire weekends to be in that building for one reason. Eala was playing, and something about her felt different. Not just talented. Different. What almost nobody outside that stadium fully understood was the weight she was carrying onto that court. Standing across the net was Leylah Fernandez, the defending champion of this exact tournament, a former US Open finalist, a player who doesn't just know how to win, she knows how to survive, how to claw back from the brink, how to make an opponent feel the walls closing in right when they think they've got the match won. And this wasn't a fresh Eala walking into that match. Just 2 days earlier, she had already gone through a brutal, nearly 2.5-hour battle against Zheng Qinwen, an Olympic gold medalist and former world number 4. Eala had been down a set and a break in that match before storming back to win it. That result put a target on her back. In professional tennis, the moment you prove you're dangerous, nobody underestimates you again. Fernandez wasn't walking into this match confused about who Eala was. She knew exactly what she was facing, and champions don't fear talent, they study it, and they try to dismantle it. The match started cautiously, both players feeling each other out, testing for a weakness, waiting for the other to overextend. And then, almost without anyone noticing, something shifted. Eala stopped simply reacting and started imposing her own rhythm, stepping inside the baseline, getting her returns deeper and heavier, playing with the kind of patience that doesn't look spectacular in the moment but is exactly the kind of tennis that wins tournaments instead of just highlight reels. Fernandez felt the shift immediately, the way champions always do, and fought back, extending rallies, changing angles, turning every point into its own small war. The crowd was fully locked in now. Every retrieval got a gasp. Every clean passing shot got louder. Thousands of strangers who had walked in as neutral spectators found themselves picking a side without even meaning to. Eala closed out the first set. Clean, composed, no wasted drama. And here's where you need to lean in, because this is where the match takes its first real turn, the one that makes everything before it feel like a warm-up. Defending champions do not go quietly. And Fernandez was about to prove exactly why she held that title. The second set opened like an entirely different match. Fernandez came out sharper, more aggressive, attacking earlier in rallies and finding deeper returns. Every service game suddenly cost Eala twice the energy it had a few minutes earlier. And then the score started sliding. 1 game became 2. 2 became 3, then 4. Fernandez surged all the way to a commanding 5-1 lead in the second set, playing some of her sharpest tennis of the entire tournament. Read that number again, because the rest of this story hinges on it. 5-1. Against a fighter like Fernandez, on her own turf, with a full day's rest advantage over an opponent who had already logged nearly 2.5 hours on court the day before, that scoreline usually doesn't get erased. It usually gets finished. This is exactly the moment where you need to pay the closest attention, because what happens next defies what almost everyone in that stadium believed was possible. Eala didn't slam her racket. She didn't argue with the umpire. She walked to the towel, breathed, reset, and walked back to the baseline wearing the exact same expression she had during the opening point of the match. That single quiet moment may be more important than anything else that happened for the rest of the night, because it was the moment a 21-year-old decided the scoreboard didn't get to write her ending for her. From 5-1 down, Eala won 6 straight games to level the set and force a tiebreak. Not with miracle shots. With one solid serve, one patient rally, 1 point at a time, asking the same question over and over, can you hold your nerve right now while I keep pushing? Fernandez, to her enormous credit, kept fighting, because that's exactly what got her the title in the first place. But something invisible was slipping through her fingers with every game. Then came the tiebreak, the most brutally honest format the sport has to offer. 2 hours of tactics and emotional investment compressed into a handful of points where a single mistake can end everything. Eala raced out to a 3-0 lead in that tiebreak and never looked back, eventually going up 5-1 before Fernandez managed to save 1 point, and then Eala closed it out with 2 consecutive forehand winners. Final tiebreak score, 7-1. Final match score, 6-2, 7-6, 1. 1 hour and 53 minutes on court. She didn't collapse to the ground. She didn't scream into the night sky. She played from in front, not from fear, trusting depth instead of hero shots, keeping the tiebreak simple when it would have been easy to tighten up. That composure is the loudest statement a player can make without saying a single word. It says, I'm not surprised I'm here. I belong here. Afterward, she gave Fernandez full credit, saying she knew her opponent was playing a little better in that stretch and that her own level had dropped slightly, the kind of honest, grounded reflection you don't often hear from someone who just pulled off one of the biggest comebacks of the tournament. And here's why this particular win matters more than a single upset on a stat sheet. This wasn't Eala's first time doing something like this in Washington that week. 2 days earlier, against Zheng Qinwen, she had also come from behind, down a set and a break, to win in 3 sets. 2 champions, 2 comebacks, back-to-back, on consecutive days, with barely 24 hours of recovery in between. That's not one great afternoon. That's a pattern. It's also not the first time this year that Eala has shown this kind of nerve under real pressure. On the grass courts of Berlin in June, she knocked out world number 2 Elena Rybakina in straight sets, then backed it up the very next day by beating world number 8 Elena Svitolina to reach her first ever WTA 500 semifinal. Weeks later at Wimbledon, she walked onto center court against defending champion Iga Swiatek and won 7-6, 9, 6-2, becoming the first Filipino player in the Open era to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam. That run at Wimbledon is what caught the attention of a name every tennis fan will recognize. Andy Roddick, the former world number 1, said on his own podcast that what people were watching had stopped being a fun underdog story and turned into something bigger. It went from a fun story to a very real story and a phenomenon, and we should all grab it, embrace it, love it, shake it, be thankful for it, he said. He wasn't saying she'd already arrived. He was saying the tennis world could no longer treat every big result from her as a surprise that would quietly disappear the following week. And this is exactly why the Washington win over Fernandez feels different from just another upset. The chairman of the DC Open revealed that once Eala's participation in the tournament was confirmed, around 80% of ticket inquiries the event received were people asking specifically when she would be playing, at a combined event already stacked with established American stars and Grand Slam champions. Philippine flags filled the stands that night. When Eala was asked afterward what it felt like to be this popular, she turned the question around and said the better question was what it felt like to be Filipino. That single answer tells you everything about the weight she's carrying. She isn't just collecting wins for herself anymore, she's carrying the hopes of people who might be walking into a tennis stadium for the very first time because of her. There is still one line missing from her resume, and it's worth being honest about it. Eala has never won a WTA Tour-level singles title. She's won at the WTA 125 level, in Guadalajara in 2025 and in Birmingham this year, and she came agonizingly close to her first tour title at Eastbourne in 2025, holding 4 championship points before Australia's Maya Joint saved every single one of them and won the final in a tiebreak. That's the box still left unchecked. But here's the question that comes out of Washington, and it's a far more dangerous one for the rest of the tour than anything a single win could produce. What happens when Eala falls behind now? What happens when the scoreboard turns against her, when the crowd starts checking their phones for parking times, when everyone in the building has already started writing the ending? Twice in 2 days in Washington, against 2 different champions, in 2 completely different ways, the answer was the same. She didn't leave. She found 6 straight games when she needed them most, and she closed the door herself. Nobody in that stadium walked out asking whether she belongs at this level anymore. That question got answered somewhere between 1 game to 5 down and 6 games to 5. The question everyone is asking now is simpler, and far more uncomfortable for whoever draws her name next. How far can she actually go from here? Because whatever happens in her very next match, one thing is now impossible to ignore: Eala is no longer someone who needs a perfect day to win. And that changes everything about how the rest of women's tennis has to prepare for her.